with some of the deer management programs I was involved in, I was shooting like 28 or 30 deer a year with a bow. So I was getting to the point where I don't know, I just was not, the spark was gone a little bit. And a buddy of mine was shooting a recurve, and he's like, man, you got to shoot a recurve. Like, that's what you need to do. So I did both for a while there. So 2005, I picked up a recurve, ended up shooting a really big mature buck on my second sit with it, which then I was fired up.
Welcome to episode 14 of the Huntxp podcast. This is Jonny and I tonight, co-hosts, as always. Hey, we appreciate you listening, just right off the bat. Like, thank you. Like, this has been super fun, and I would love to hear more from, I know you're out there, because you come and talk to Jonny and I, and you're like, dude, I've listened to all of them. It's awesome. Like, say something in the comments, or like, I want you to know that you have the permission to disagree with us or to add your opinion to the things that we say. Particularly, I know there's a community out there that kind of listens from week to week. So you don't have to be passive. Jump in on this thing and say hello. So, Jonny, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. I want to echo what you said. Don't be afraid. Just say something.
Just say something.
Say anything. That's a movie from the 80s. Say anything. Just say anything.
There you go. I was thinking the John Mayer song, Say What You Need to Say, which, have you heard that song?
Absolutely.
Well, you actually just heard it because the only line in the song essentially is just say what you need to say.
Yeah.
John Mayer shout outs. But I have to, and I'm sorry if you're just listening to this, I have to comment on Johnny's shirt because it's freaking awesome. So, like, get yourself on YouTube and check out Johnny's shirt. Tell him about the shirt. It's awesome.
It's from the 1980s. Growing up in this storage room off of our basement, my dad had this, magical hanger. There was this large rack, and it had all these hunting clothes hanging on it from stuff he was currently,
that's awesome.
Yeah, like Narnia, like the wardrobe kind of.
Yes,
but
got it.
I would go in there, and I would just go in there and snag stuff as a high schooler because I'm like, oh, I'm going on hunting. Here's a shirt,
Sure.
Before you got into buying your own stuff, and I would just borrow all my dad's old stuff. Well, this one quickly became one of my favorites. There's some really cool pictures of him in South Dakota in the late 80s wearing it. And I have harvested several deer wearing it. And I just thought it was a cool shirt to bring out for tonight. I was inspired by when John Eberhart wore his old school shirt when we did his. So I was like, I better wear this. And I think next week I'll wear the tree bark camel pattern one.
Yes.
But this is a Cabela shirt from the late 80s. So
the kids would say we've got serious drip on this podcast.
Yeah, and so I want to shout out to Big Mike. Shout out to my dad, Big Mike.
Big
and
Mike.
It's
coming back around,
shirt.
Man.
Yeah. Thank you, Dad, for always being a pack rat and holding on to your hunting stuff and not selling it so I could use it.
Yes.
And now wear it on a podcast.
Yes. Hey, if you click the link because you recognize the name of our guest and you maybe saw it on some of his profiles, welcome to the fans of Greg Krause. We're so grateful to have him on. He was actually a recommendation from a previous guest, Mel Haggy, who was awesome. And the internet responded awesome to her. I think she's just so intriguing. Traditional bow hunting so intriguing. Jonny and I were curious the whole time, had tons of questions for her. So I'm sure we're going to have a ton of questions tonight. And though I can't completely tell you where this conversation is going to go, I'm sure it's going to be worth your time because this guy looks like he's got a ton of experience, a ton of knowledge, and we're excited to pick his brain about just whatever we get into hunting wise, but traditional bow hunting, he's a master at it. So we're stoked for it. I mean, with all these traditional bow hunting guests we're having on, Jonny, we might just need to at least try next year or something like that. Fill a doe tag or something,
Yeah, give it a go. Yeah, why
Give it a
not?
go.
Challenge ourselves a little bit, right?
Challenge ourselves. Speaking of challenges,
I know where you're going.
Jonny knows right where I'm going with this one.
I know where you're going.
Jonny and I just came off what I would categorize as a pretty humbling weekend in the predator hunting scene. So we got out and we did 4 or 5. I did 4 or 5 different stands, as they're called, and we tried our hand at some predator hunting. Boy, was I optimistic. And long story short, there was no shooting. There was no coyotes. And I'm just curious, Jonny, what are you thinking about all that? I mean, it was fun just to be out. It was fun to hunt. It always is. But yeah, nothing. What did you think?
I'm going to just call out Cody Krause and say he's full of crap. I'm just kidding.
Not true.
No, not true. Cody Krause is, yes,
we're just BSing him.
Yeah, just joking. But no, I don't know. I was also optimistic. We did one stand on my property and I see predators regularly. The tracks are everywhere. We did a couple of sets with our friend Ben, who's been on the pod before, in some known spots, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't working. And my biggest takeaway, and talking to Cody as well, and he mentioned this when he was talking about predator hunting, was like, thermals are a game changer,
Yeah.
It's a big time game changer. We don't have thermal stuff, so we were out at dusk and at dawn, giving it a go. And I've shot coyotes at those times, but it didn't happen this weekend, and that's okay. But I just think, again, the big takeaway is like, man, those thermals, that's a game changer. Because even Saturday night, last night, JD, I went outside at like 7:30 and I could hear the coyotes going crazy in my field. And I was like, where were you this morning?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure they were just laughing at us.
I think that's what it was, actually.
Just inside of the woods.
It did feel like they were mocking me in particular.
Yeah. Well, like every good hunting failure, it brings up some learnings and some questions. I think you're kind of like, I wonder about this. And one of those, I think Ben was the first to articulate it, is like, how close is too close when you're trying to set up on coyotes? Not that we saw some that spooked, but we all kind of had this sense like, are we getting like a little too far in their bubble? Like, do you want to set up just far enough away where they can't sense you with any other sense other than their ears? Because it kind of felt like we were getting a little too close at certain points based on knowledge of the particular situation. So I think it's a great question. So if you're a predator hunter and you've got insight on that, like how close is too close? How close should you set up to where you anticipate they are? That was one of the questions that came up. And then seasonal calling sequences. I mean, I believe Cody, I think his calling sequence looks on paper awesome, and his philosophy of just trying to trigger the thing that's going to piss him off most or push their buttons. But at the same time, I wonder if there's seasonality to it. Like if we should have pressed into, since we're kind of in the mating season, pressed into those calls a little bit first. I don't know. Those are some questions that come up. And the main question was, how expensive is a thermal scope? That was mostly what was coming up. It was mostly the question coming up in my mind. But any more thoughts on our escapades this weekend?
Yeah, I talked to Ben at church this morning, actually, and he was like, hey, I was kind of going down some rabbit holes on the internet on predator hunting after we struck out on Friday. Of course. And he's like, one thing that I kept reading about is if you're going to hunt them in daylight, their daylight movement is very much based on the lunar phase.
Interesting.
And he's like, and maybe we were just in the wrong lunar phase for any sort of daylight movement. I have no idea the validity of that. Maybe someone out there, you do, and you want to speak to that. But it was just something that Ben was picking on. And Ben does a pretty good job of doing his research. So maybe there's something to that.
Totally. That's interesting. Let us know. I know there's a big debate within whitetails about lunar phases, whether that's legit or not. I mean, I feel like that would almost, since you get the image of them howling at the moon when you think of coyote like that, I feel like that maybe is more of a factor with the predators.
Yeah.
Did you know that you can use AI to become a better hunter? Here's what you got to do. Our team at Huntxp has built a custom AI. We call it Crockett. And it is the combination of the power of AI and the collective wisdom of hunters for many years mashed up together and put right in your pocket, right in the field where you can level up your hunting game. You can ask it things like, what's the best broadhead setup for my situation? What's the best day to hunt this week? All sorts of questions. You can take pictures of the snake you almost stepped on in South Dakota and say, is this a rattlesnake? That's something that actually happened to us. It's super fun. Our community is having a great time building this. We'd love for you to join in at huntxp.com. Join us. Well, we're going to do some Crockett news because it's been so fun. And Jonny, the first piece of Crockett news is not going to make you feel great about our predator hunting prowess, because the first Crockett news is news of some teenagers in downtown Chicago who shot a coyote with a bow and then got very much in trouble with it. I don't really know if I need to get your thoughts on that, other than immediately I laughed out loud when I saw that headline, because it's the first one. I'm like, so clearly we should have been in downtown Chicago hunting guy, if apparently that's where people were killing them this past weekend. So if you have thoughts, great. I just wanted to share that.
I do have thoughts. It actually makes me feel a little bit better, because now I'm like, I know that the coyotes have ventured to the city and they're basically probably going to be like raccoons there. So I'm just saying it's easier.
Yeah, it's easier.
It's a city limit predator. It's used to seeing people. It's fine. It probably walked right. They probably had a little mouse on the end of a string, and you probably walked right in and just smacked it.
They are the Seek One of predator hunting. The urban hunters of the coyotes.
We need to get Seek One on this podcast.
Yeah. Tag him, Seek One crew, not at this moment, but at some point.
Yeah.
No, love those guys. Their content's amazing. The bucks they shoot are incredible.
Amazing. Yes.
It's wild.
Actually, he took a sweet buck from the ground in the rain, and the video is insane.
Oh yes.
He sneaks up on its bed, and when he shoots, you just see all the moisture zip off his arrow. That's an incredible video.
I mean, most everything they put out is pretty incredible.
Right.
Video work and hunting skills.
Yeah.
Kudos to them. That would be a dream. It'd be sweet to talk with them and pick their brain about urban hunting. Someday. Crockett news number 2. This is exciting news. It seems that Wisconsin has upped their bear quota from 6% of tags given to 14% of tags going to be given this next year. Oh, that's the first I'd heard about that. I can verify it some more, and maybe you guys who are listening to this, if you're in Wisconsin and paying attention to it. But that sounds super positive to me. I mean, that's more than double the quota, if I'm reading that right, or understanding the percentages right. And it seems like there's plenty of them up northern Wisconsin. So,
yeah.
What do you think about that? Doubling the quota.
Think we've been saying this for years, myself and some of the guys I hunt with. And I know someone who guides, and it's like they are way too stingy on these tags. The amount of bears that are around is basically, we need more tags. It should not be this hard for people to draw. I have a bear stand at my house, and I harvested a bear out of it, and several others have harvested bears out of it. There's plenty.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great idea.
That's good. Well, I hope I'm not sure if that's taking effect. I actually applied for my first bear tag this year in Wisconsin as I was applying for my turkey tag.
Yeah.
And so initially I was like, well, planning for 2030, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be sooner.
Maybe not.
Maybe I'll be sitting at your house taking the next one. We'll see.
You're more than welcome. Yep.
Do you put in for them every year? Or what do you do?
I just do preference points typically. I think I'm on 5. With this news, I probably could have. But Rachel, my wife, she's on 7 or 8 right now. And so she should. But I didn't put in for hers this year because I think this year the dogs run first this year, I believe, unless I'm confused. But if you're not familiar, some years every other year, it's either the dogs run for the first week and then you can sit, or it's flip-flopped. So I usually try to line my bear tag up for when the sitters can go first before the dogs can run.
Makes sense. The dogs have to really shake up their patterns and stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't
I mean,
affect as much by my house because I'm on private land, but I know public land sometimes people say it messes up. But I mean, I'm all for it. If you hunt with dogs, fantastic. Not against it by any
yeah,
means.
sure.
But for those of us who sit a stand for a bear, I try to line up my tag for years where the sitters go first.
Pro tip from Jonny Beebs. Last piece of Crockett news is there were more cases of CWD in Minnesota. So I'm learning more about that. I hunt in one unit where there's mandatory testing and like you have to quarter the animal in that unit. And you can't carry it. You can only carry its meat out. You can't carry anything else out. So I've experienced some of the effects of those things, never firsthand, but in a regulatory sense. And so I'm curious, particularly from the audience, if you hunt in a high CWD area, how have you seen that affect your deer herd? So I think it was only a couple cases, so it's not like red alert for Minnesota, but it's not trending well and raising some more questions about what needs to be done about it in particular areas. So do you have any experience or any of that with CWD?
When we were kids, JD, there was a season where we had to have our deer tested.
Sure. Yeah,
I think when we were middle school or high school, but now in Wisconsin, it's not mandatory, but every time you register a harvest, it suggests that you get them tested. I personally haven't because I haven't heard of any cases around, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Hopefully they can tamp it down. Thank you for your thoughts, Jonny. Thank you.
Thoughts for your thoughts.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm excited to talk to Greg. I'm excited to learn a little bit more, go a little bit deeper here. So let's bring him on the pod. Well, Greg, you're here. Welcome to the Huntxp podcast. We're so glad to have you.
Well, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. Would you just go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in New York, about an hour north of New York City, which is not really like what you think of as the outdoors capital of the world by any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, been hunting, I got my license at 12. I've been hunting since then. It's a bow-only county where I live in, so I grew up bow hunting and sort of just stuck with bow hunting. Since then, I started like a Wild Traditions outdoor page just to share my sort of adventures. I've done a bunch of video stuff with the Push Archery, so you might like stumble across YouTube stuff there. Other than that, it's like I got two daughters, 8 and 10. My 10-year-old is sort of obsessed with hunting right now, so I'm going to take it while I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife's amazing. She supports me in all of this. So that's sort of who I am.
That's awesome, man.
I'm 43 years old, so I've been at this quite a while now. Got my first deer when I was 13, I think. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Can you tell us that story? What was that like? Because it was archery first deer. Because you
first deer archery. So this is actually a wild one. My second year of bow hunting, and it was my best friend to this day, like my best hunting partner. It was his first year bow hunting, and I wish I knew the date. Like I should have. I want to say it was like November 6th, right? Like just that like real deer starting to get fired up, bucks chasing, and it was raining that morning, so we slept in. And we were hunting a piece of property right across the street from my house. And we, around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, the rain stopped. So we said, oh, let's go do some sneaking and peeking, some still hunting, just sort of move through the woods. The ground's quiet after the rain. And we split up. And I don't know, late morning, we got together and we both had seen some deer, but no shots. And as we were walking out, a spike chases a doe straight at us. And we both instinctively just like knock an arrow and draw back, get ready for the shot. I drew actually on the doe. He drew on the spike, but the doe turned. I never got a shot. I just turned back, got my pin on the spike shot. His arrow crossed my arrow in flight.
No way.
Our arrows hit about 1.5 inches apart in the spine.
No way.
The deer dropped from all of the noise of two bows going off, like old fair whitetail,
Yep.
Or we just sucked and shot high. I don't know. We were excited.
We'll go with the first option.
Yeah. We had first deer, the same deer at the same time, sort of just Yeah. Yeah. Deer went right down. We walked back to my house. My father was out in the yard, like raking leaves, and he could see we're like smiling. He's like, "What did you guys do?" And we're like, "Yeah." And we're like, "We got a deer." And he's like, "We got a deer?
How
Huh?"
does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. So yeah, we both, yeah. So
Dude,
we both
that's so
shot a deer
fun.
at the same time. Yeah, I think, hold on. I want to reach up. This was my half of the spike.
I was
Oh,
honestly going to ask you that. I was like, did you each take a spike?
that's
That is
awesome.
awesome.
This was my first deer right there.
What a
Beautiful.
trophy, dude. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. Wow, man. That's cool. So then I'm sure that just was like the little snowball that went down the hill that became a passion for you. Is that right? Or has it always kind of developed, or did you take a little hiatus and then come back to it? Or
And, you're like 13, 14 years old, you're into deer hunting, and then you're like 15 and you find out there's girls out there. Like, you know,
right.
so I
Yep.
feel like a few years there in high school, I hunted. I always bow hunted, but it wasn't always crazy. And then as I got into like my late teens, early 20s, I dove back into it hard. And a lot of it was like, I just saw a lot of people sort of just ground me and getting back into bow hunting really hard, like pulled me in and like just get me out of a lot of trouble. Like when you're in the woods, you're staying out of trouble in the woods. So yeah, by the time I was 20, I was like really back into deer hunting, like really hard. And then I I try to get out, like our deer season's like 3 months long, and I try to get out at least 5 days a week. If I
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely love it, and
That's
that's
cool,
what I
man.
live for. Yeah.
So, you started on compound, and how long did you hunt with a compound until you started getting interested in traditional stuff?
So I don't know, 96, 97, and then 2005, a really high deer population where we were, and they were trying to reduce doe numbers. They were giving us unlimited doe tags. And at that point, by 2005, I was shooting a lot of deer. And unfortunately, I would get to the point where I was like, not excited if a doe came in. I was like debating if I wanted to deal with dragging a deer and gutting it that day or whatever else. I mean, with some of the deer management programs I was involved in, I was shooting like 28 or 30 deer a year with a bow. So I was getting to the point where I don't know, I just was not, the spark was gone a little bit. And a buddy of mine was shooting a recurve, and he's like, "Man, you got to shoot a recurve. Like, that's what you need to do." So I did both for a while there. So 2005, I picked up a recurve. I guess it was 2006, I picked up a recurve. I ended up shooting a really big, mature buck on my second sit with it, which then I was fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a good idea where the deer were, and I had a spot where I was like, "Oh man, if a deer comes through here, it's going to be a nice close, like 15-yard shot. It's going to be perfect for a stick bow." So I brought my recurve out. Took a really nice buck, but I hunted with both for years ago. Yeah. For a while, I was shooting both. I was hunting with the compound and the recurve, and it sort of ebbed and flowed. And I think I took at least one or two deer every year with the recurve, but it went from, oh, I'll try to shoot some does early season with the recurve, and I'll hunt the rut with the compound, to the point where I was like, I'll shoot some does with the compound, and then I'll really chase some bucks with the stick bow, because that was where my passion was. So, and about 5 years ago, I just never picked the compound back up. Just sit in the case and just didn't have just didn't want to shoot it anymore.
So is that because your level of proficiency grew to the point where you felt very comfortable with the scenarios you were putting yourself in? Or did you just fall deeper in love with that style of hunting? Or was it a mix of both?
I'm sure it was a mix of all of it. I mean, I'd shot a lot of deer with a compound, and I was super confident with that. So when I got a deer with the compound, it wasn't quite as rewarding as those times I was killing a deer with the recurve or longbow.
Sure.
And I was getting better at hunting when I was shooting a compound. Proficiency with the bow instead of like woodsmanship. So I'd set up in a woodlot, and I'm like, okay, I'm really comfortable at the 40 yards. So I'm like, I got an 80-yard swath here. And with the recurve, I'm like, oh, that's a par two. I gotta bring that way closer.
Mm.
So yeah, I sort of have just grown as a hunter to become better at the woodsmanship part, better as a shot with the recurve, but overall it's just more fulfilling.
So I would love to learn more about that. So tell us the areas of woodmanship that you grew in, maybe that you were unconscious to you, but then became very conscious, like, oh, I got to get better at this if I'm going to be successful within a closer distance. Name some pieces of woodsmanship that you pretty quickly found out you wanted to get better at to increase your chances.
Well, I relied on, like, because I was relying on distance with the compound a little more, I also relied on height. So my stands, I was using sticks and hang-ons for a climber, but 25 feet was sort of the minimum I was going to climb. I was going up like 30. My bow rope was 30 feet long. And a lot of times I was tugging on the bow as I got to hunting level.
Dang.
And I started trying to do that with the recurve, but I realized like I could get away with more movement and scent was somewhat mitigated, but the shot angles were too steep at a 15-yard shot from 30 feet tall. I couldn't hit both lungs. My target was so small. So I had to learn. The first thing I learned is I had to hunt like a lot lower. So I had to get smarter with back cover. I had to get smarter with really pay attention to not just the wind, but the thermals and everything else. And I also have to just sort of pay attention to when I can move and when I couldn't. I just couldn't get away with as much. So that was the major thing I learned, as well as instead of focusing on areas, I couldn't cover maybe 2 trails that were, 30 yards this way and then that way. I have to really try to focus on the particular trail and like know exactly where I wanted to make that shot happen.
Yeah.
I'm soaking that in. I think that's really cool. I've loved hearing, we've talked to a couple people that have been compound bow hunters and they're starting to dabble with trad bow, and it's come up in some of the hunting circles that I kind of run with as well. And it's interesting because the people you talk to when they say they have started to shoot a trad bow, how every one of them has said it's more rewarding.
It's a lot of fun. Like, even like when I was shooting the compound, you go out in the yard and you practice a little bit and you're like, okay, I'm shooting really well. And you take a handful of shots and you feel really good about that. With a recurve, even if you're hitting well, man, you're having fun. So I shoot it more. And the thing with that is like, I tell everyone get one, like grab a Semic Sage or something real simple, grab a Black Hunter off of Amazon and get some arrows made up. And like, when you go like scouting or thing like this time of year, take and go stump shooting, put some like judo points on it, and like, shoot some leaves and stumps and just walk around and have a blast. You can't do that with a compound. You'll blow up arrows real fast.
Yeah.
So,
well, I went out to South Dakota with my brothers and Levi, who's a friend of Mel's, and he's a traditional bow hunter. And it was just awesome to be able to. He's just like, here, you try it. And first of all, I was like, what? You don't do that with someone's bow. But then he's like, no, you could shoot it. And I just thought that was so cool. Like 3 or 4 of us just tried with his bow. And I mean, obviously not quite the same, but you can't do that with a compound. You can't just like pass it around and say, hey, give it a shot. And it was just so cool to have that shared experience and be able to do that. So that's just reinforcing, like, just pick one up, have some fun with it. I think that's a great way to get into it.
It's kind of how you learn as a kid too. My dad would come home from a garage sale with like a longbow, like just an old one, and he would give me this quiver full of arrows, and I would just run around the yard shooting trees, shooting whatever. I remember trying to shoot grasshoppers, like just trying to shoot everything, and that it was so fun, right? It was just a really fun thing.
And then we'll take it out in the spring. We'll do a bunch of like shoot carp, bow fishing.
Oh, yeah?
And like I did it with a compound, and it's great. But like with a recurve, like when those fish are cruising, you got to make a fast shot. It's much easier. I'll get a shot off that recurve that like I would just be getting camming into anchor. My shot would already be, if I was shooting a compound and the recurve, the shot's already gone. So that's fun. You get a lot of shooting in.
Well, I want to talk to you about because you're a very proficient shooter and you seem to help people do this. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to go back a little bit and talk to us a little bit about the thermals and back cover, because I think as people are becoming any kind of hunter, whether it's compound or otherwise, that's like 2.0 level learning with hunting. Like maybe you get that the wind is important, but thermals are another thing, and back cover in particular. People instinctively just think cover, but when you're getting closer, what I heard you say is back cover even becomes more increasingly important. So talk about how you think about those two things now and what you make sure you got covered before you're chasing something.
So where I'm in New York, it's like big glacial deposits. So there's a lot of topography. There's a lot of little like cuts and outcroppings of rocks, valleys, hills, draws. It's nothing real high elevation, but it's fairly steep terrain in a lot of spots. So we get not only the thermals, we get these sort of like what I've been learning the past handful of years now is like we get even these like micro thermals where like a stream running through a draw will sort of change how the winds flow. So, thermals basically, as the sun's coming up and the earth rises, the thermals pull up in the afternoon. As it's cooling, they drop. That's the basic thing of it. But how that relates to the terrain you're in when it's sort of broken terrain, it's not that cut and dry. So I try to think of it in a lot of ways like if you're pouring water over the terrain, how is it going to flow? And a lot of times that'll show you how that scent is going to flow. But things like a water feature can change the temperature and sort of change how it's interacting. So when you're getting winded or you're seeing deer sort of pick up on you, pay attention to what's going on and why. I've been at it a long time and I learn stuff every year. And if I don't, then I just wasn't paying attention. So I think people sort of like are like, oh, I don't know, the deer just blew out of there. I'm not really sure why. Like there's a reason. Was it your ground scent when you walked in? Was it the wind direction? Was it the thermals? As the wind and the thermals interact, we'll get a lot of areas that are really hard to hunt because the wind direction is sort of opposite the thermals. And you'll get these swirling effects in these bottoms. And even up on the hilltops, it'll be sucking down into the bottom. So each little area is very different. And I think just bring milkweed with you. Spend a lot of time throwing them out. I'll take little, it's not the milkweed, but they're like the little like cotton balls almost, little thing. And I put them on my shirt up here. I line my shirt with it when I'm hunting. And that way I don't have to dig into my pack. I can just pull one off and I just drop them. And I will just do that like every 10 minutes. If I think the wind shifted or thermal shifted, I'll drop another one. And I really pay attention to how that works. And I might like burn that spot out that hunt, but like maybe next year I'll like know how to like access it. This year there's a spot we've been hunting for on and off for 10 years. And I hunt almost exclusively public land. But there's a particular tree that my buddy and I, we sort of have found and we hunt it and we try to really do everything. We might only hunt it once a season, twice a season between the two of us. We try to be really like low pressure, but we always hunted with northwest wind, thinking that was the best. And this year, just with the northwest wind, it was kind of rolling down into this swamp and it just didn't seem right. And I got busted twice. And 2 weeks later, we had a southwest wind. And I'm like, I'm going to try it with that. It doesn't necessarily make sense on paper, but I'm going to see what the thermals are doing in there. And I got in there and I was covered up in deer. And I'm like, whoa, okay, it's been 10 years and we finally figured this out.
Yeah.
Just by sort of paying attention to the details.
Yeah.
So that's basically it's trial and error. You're going to screw up a lot, but as long as you're paying attention, then those failures, you can learn something from it. And it was worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Anything you want to say on back cover?
Yeah. My area is a lot of like open hardwoods. Back cover's tough. Fine. I try to like find oak trees that'll still hold their leaves. But a lot of what I do is if I expect the deer to be coming, say, from the north, I'm going to set my stand up on the south side of the tree and keep the tree between me and the deer. And I'm going to shoot them as they pass me.
Got it.
So a lot like how you would.
Their approach is you're
a lot like you would with a saddle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I saddle hunted back in the late 90s. I still have a saddle now I use occasionally. With the recurve, I don't like the bridge system trying to get over for weak side shots with the 64-inch bow. But for the past like 15 years, I've used a rock climbing harness as my safety harness. So with a climber or a lock-on, like with sticks, I can still lean out and shoot around the tree as you would with a saddle. So for me, it's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's a good adaptation.
And if I get in a tree with multiple trunks, I try to keep a trunk between me and where the deer are going to be. Whatever it is, try to break up your outline. You don't want to be sticking out off the side of the tree. You just can't get away with it when the deer are inside of 15 yards and fairly pressured deer.
And you have that movement. You can't draw and anticipation.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sort of I'm sort of known for having a long draw and a lot of like the videos and stuff, like a long hold. And still that's 15, 20 seconds maybe. I mean, that's not a compound where you're going to get, 30 seconds, a minute and a half,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would love to just imagine you're coaching Jonny and I. We've got our black hunters in from Amazon, and we're standing there in the backyard with you. What are you going to tell us to unlearn or forget in that moment as compound users? And then what are you going to tell us to learn? Or what are you going to tell us to kind of focus in on as we start to learn the draw process and the shooting process?
We're going to find out real quick how well you shoot your compound bows, because I'm going to tell you to shoot it exactly how you shoot a compound bow, except for we're going to have to break down all the little parts of it to make sure you're really drawing with back muscles and back tension and everything else. But when I first started, guys told me, stop shooting like a compound. You got to get bent over and you got to nonsense. For me, like I shoot with an upright bow. Now, if I have to shoot around a limb, I can cant it, but I shoot with an upright bow, full extension, back tension. It looks like
vertical.
it looks like I'm shooting a compound bow. That's the main thing. I'm going to tell you, when you start, shoot with a really light bow, 30 pounds, 35 pounds, maybe 40. So Tom Klum Sr., he's from RMS Gear, and he has a solid archery mechanics course. And I've worked with him and taken his course. And he says, you want to get a bow that you can treat like a toy. You should be able to pull it back with so little effort that you can feel every muscle you're engaging. Guys are like, I can, I'm shooting 70 pounds in a compound. I'll shoot a 55-pound recurve. It's too much. My compound was generally 85 pounds. I was shooting heavyweight. And when I went to a 55-pound recurve, it kicked my tail. Like, it was way too heavy. So, yeah, 40, 45 pounds, max is where I'd start with you guys with that. You're going to stay upright, draw back, find a repeatable anchor on your face. And I'm going to have, I tell everyone to start with shooting 3 fingers under. It puts the arrow right up closer to your eye. And then you're looking basically right down the shaft, almost like you would like shooting a shotgun. And then we're going to start there. Increase back tension until the shot breaks. You want like a good, clean shot. And ideally you want sort of a surprise break like you would shooting a back tension release. And there's ways to do that.
How does that, like, are you just pulling until it naturally comes off your fingers? What do you mean?
That is definitely a way people will do. Because if you get into your back right, you can increase tension, but you won't increase draw length. So you'll be building tension, but the draw length won't move. You're not pulling with the shoulder. So you can just keep building tension until you sort of subconsciously break the shot. I know a lot of people, Melody uses, she talked about on the podcast, the feather to nose, where she'll draw back and the feather hits her nose and that sort of triggers the shot. I've done that. I've used a limb clicker, which is like it's a little, like the clickers they use for training dogs. It's a little bladed piece of metal that clicks. You put one of them on your top limb and there's a string that goes to your bowstring. As you draw, you hit a certain draw length. And as you increase tension, it'll click and then your shot will break. And any of those, once your brain sort of recognizes what it is, you don't think about it. You hear the click and the shot breaks. So you're not like, oh, when it clicks, I'll release it. No, it becomes subconscious. The click happens and the shot breaks. For me, I use a grip trigger. It's a little like push button clicker I put on the palm of my grip of my bow, and I'll keep my wrist a little bit of tension in my wrist to keep my finger off or my palm off that button. And I'll focus on holding it like that. And then once I get that done, I start focusing on back tension and I just relax that wrist. And when that click happens, the shot's gone.
So you're basically building a psychological trigger through that experience or sensation of that click going off. So then your body just knows that's when the arrow flies.
I mean, all this stuff is like through Joel Turner. He does like Shot IQ. I mean, his kid Bodie's been tearing up the compound circuit, just destroying everybody. He's running the compound, but it's the same sort of thing. You're not thinking about, you don't want your sight to equal a release. Not with a compound, not with a rifle, not with a pistol, not with a trad bow. Because that's when you start like flinching, shot anticipation. You know, how many times do you get up on there and you get your pin settled on the target and you catch yourself double clutch, like, okay, all right, no. So that's why a lot of guys go to back tension, hinges,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
They'll
smiling because if you're a Huntxp fan and you look at our intro, there is a quick little B-roll of me shooting a deer, and it is the worst flinch I've ever done in my life. And so next time you watch, look for it. I shoot a trigger and it's just like it's the worst ever. I'm like, oh boy. But
you know, so a lot of it, all the same things apply. But yeah, with the trigger, like I got my daughter, she just got her first compound. She's 10, and we got her set up with a trigger. And I'm just slowly. We worked a lot with rifles, so she got really good with breaking a clean rifle trigger. She like talks herself through with a mantra through the shot, so she doesn't expect it. We do a lot of slow motion filming, but working with her with a trigger, it's very different because there's a lot more sight movement. So you want to time that shot, but you got to just trust that the shot is going to be where it's going to go and let the shot break clean.
one eye or two eyes open?
Two eyes
open. Or does two eyes open for you?
I mean, unless you're dominant, I would suggest two eyes open. But I suggest that even with my compound with a peep sight, I'm shooting two eyes open. Maybe squint a little bit, but mostly you're shooting two eyes open.
And are you picking a spot on the animal or target, and that's got your focus the whole time, and then the rest is just kind of like your body's doing the mechanics, or how are you?
For me, it's the other way around. I'm like, I see my sight, I set it, and I sort of forget it. Like I'm just like, all right, the sight's on. You know, my sight picture's where I want it. Now I gap shoot. I'll shoot instinctive out until my point on, and then once I get my point on, I'm conscious of my point and where it is on the target to where I'm going to hit. So up close, I'm just that looks right, and I shoot. When I get out to, I usually set my point on to about 22 yards. So when I get out to about 20 yards, 22 yards, I'm conscious of my point and where it has to be. It's like shooting a single pin sight at that point. So I'll know it has to be higher or lower, and I focus on that. But once it's set, I'm like, okay, there it is. Now I'm focused just on building back tension until my trigger pops and my shot breaks.
That's great, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's so similar to the compound, you know, for years, just, you know, grip it and rip it. And it's fun to do that, but it's real fun when you hit things consistent. So, you know, I mean, I shot pure instinctive shot for years, and you'd have these days where you're like, holy crow, I'm unstoppable, right? And you go out and you'd shoot a deer and you're like, wow, it was a perfect shot. And it was further than I thought, you know, it was 25 yards or, you know, whatever it was. And it was a perfect shot. And then like the next day you're like, I can't hit the bail. Like I can't hit the target at all.
Yeah.
And you just didn't know like where the disconnect and the failure was. So by like doing the same thing with like you would with a compound where you're building up a shot process that you're going to grip it this way, you're going to do this, all those things. When you start like not hitting anything, you can kind of go back through your steps and be like, okay, this is where I'm making a mistake. Yeah. And it's so much easier to diagnose that way.
Is it true like I get the sense that maybe when you switch to traditional bow, it feels more a part of you than the compound does? Does the compound then kind of retroactively seem more machine than bow? Or is that too brash of a way to understand it?
No, it's pretty much spot on. You know, I think the biggest thing is I don't have a draw stop.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing, right? I don't have a peep sight. I don't have a kisser. I don't have a draw stop. I don't have those like mechanical things to hold me. The sights, that's fine. But you know, I sort of do have a sight with the tip of my arrow, but it's the draw stop. You know, I could be like, you know, where am I? And I could deviate an inch and a half real easy if I'm not careful. And same thing without a kisser. I mean, you know, have you ever like accidentally slid your peep up a quarter of an inch, and then you're like, why am I missing the target? You know, you get your bow tuned up again. You just put your strings on it. You measured everything. You think it's right, and then you go to the target. And you're like, you know, I'm 10 inches high, or you know, whatever it is. So think about that. I have no kisser. It's real easy to start moving up or down just a little bit and throwing it off. So that part you have to really just do super consistent. So then by default, the compound is a machine that makes that so much easier.
Yeah. So I'm also gathering that so you'd imagine getting proficient enough. Mel, when we talked with her, I don't know if it was you who told her this, but she's like, I had someone say to me, don't get to the point where you think you can hit the deer, get to the point where you're confident you can kill it. So if that's the point we're trying to reach to in our practice and we get there, it seems like the next obstacle is in the seconds or moments that matter to go from there's the deer and I'm able to successfully draw without spooking it. Like that seems to be the next hurdle or challenge. So do you have any insight for the hunter who's going to go practice this, or maybe already has, but now has to go get in the woods, and instead of like a compound where you can draw and then anticipate them coming in, you got to draw when they're there, or like you have to do things differently? Do you have any tips or things to pay attention to, or little tricks that you've used since you've killed so many deer in those moments where the choosing when to draw and how to?
I'm going to go back to, you're going to fail a lot. So pay attention to when you fail. I mean, that's going to be the theme of the night here, is like, you're going to fail a whole lot, but like,
if you want to do trad pull, you will fail.
You're going to fail.
But that's it. Fail. But like, you know, I started, you know, when I started hunting with a compound, I'll take it back to that. Like when I started hunting with that, there was, you know, Bowhunter magazine, right? There was Chuck Adams on Saturday morning. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have access to stuff. So we failed all the time trying to figure that out. I have friends that picked it up more recently, and there's just more resources out there. So you sort of fail less. But that being said, with a stick bow, that makes your stand placement so much more important, because I want to get it when the deer is like behind a tree, so I can shoot it while its head is obscured, or at least draw while it's walking behind the tree and shoot as it steps out.
Yeah.
Or maybe try to get those quartering away shots. I mean, we want them anyway, but if they're like focused the other way and you're shooting coming and quartering away, like you can get away with more, obviously. So a lot of it becomes just like that back cover we talked about, stand placement, and then shot selection. And then I think it really does become sort of like gut feeling once you've done it enough times and succeeded and failed. So when to draw and when not to draw. There's not like, I wish there was like a book which is like, this is what you do and this is what you don't. But every situation is so dynamic. I think, you know, have confidence in your shooting. Don't sweat getting picked off, because so many people rush a shot because they're trying to draw and rush the shot. They're afraid. Like when you're confident you can draw, hit anchor, run your shot. Like don't rush it because you're afraid. You just got to go through a shot process and make the shot count.
I think that's really interesting. You know, you said you have two daughters, 10 and 8, correct? And so I have 3 children. My oldest 2 are 9 and 7, 2 boys, and they are, sounds like your daughters, where they're just super into hunting, right? So I've been capitalizing on that as well. But we talked about woodsmanship earlier, and the things that you have learned to do over all your many years of experience, just like the things I've learned to do over many years of experience. And it's fun and frustrating at times to watch, to go hunting with your kids, and they just don't know yet. They haven't failed yet. They don't understand yet. They haven't learned yet. You know, I talk to them as much as I can about, this is when you need to move. This is when you can't move. These are things you need to watch when the deer is walking in. This is the time to move now when its head is behind the tree, like those kind of things. So it's really funny kind of going through that process again and just thinking through that. Because for you, for me, for JD at this point, you do it without thinking. You talked about your instincts a lot. You just know this is my time to draw based on my experience, but you're not thinking through that. Whereas I feel like if I were to take this leap into trad bow hunting, there would be things I would need to relearn, or I would have to train myself on, or think of more than I do now with my compound. Because you've talked about it too. I can get away with a whole lot more with my compound. I can draw when that deer's 50 yards away rather than 15 yards away. You know what I mean? So I just think it's really interesting to hear you talk through this. It's making me think a lot.
So, but like with your kids, there's not like okay, here's the list of when to move, right? Like
right.
It's so dynamic that you can't figure it out. I will say the best thing for new hunters, and especially for children, is go squirrel hunting. This is where like I try to preach this to everybody. My kids have been out with me since they were 3 years old. We go out and shoot squirrels. You learn so much woodsmanship being in the woods. You're sneaking through the oak flats. And we're always paying attention to, rubs and scrapes and deer tracks and trails and all the deer sign as well. We're, trying to be quiet enough so we can sneak up on a squirrel to get a shot. All of the same, things come into play for hunting squirrels and hunting deer. They really do, except for you're going to have a lot more opportunities on any given day. So you have a lot more opportunities to fail and learn from those failures. So I've talked to a lot of people, and I think, like, when I was growing up, a lot of people shot squirrels, and now it's sort of abnormal for people to go out squirrel hunting. It's not very common, but you can learn so much, especially with kids. Go out there with a 22, go out there with a 410, hunt some squirrels in the off season, like in February, January, February, whatever, get out
That's
there.
exactly what we've
Okay.
been doing. And I remember my dad, he would give me the equipment, as like a pellet gun or at the time, whatever. And I would go out and shoot squirrels, doing exactly what you're talking about, learning to sneak up on them. And my boys right now are obsessed with squirrel hunting. That's what we did this afternoon. We went out and we've been shooting squirrels. It's been awesome.
That's
This
so
year I bought
fun.
a 25 caliber air rifle, one of those Benjamin Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
Man, because I can't shoot rifles in my area, but I can shoot air rifles and shotguns. Man, those air rifles are not like the old Crossmans
No,
we had
it's
growing
not
up.
like the Crossman Pump Master.
Right.
I had a coyote 3 nights ago trying to get in my chicken coop, and I shot it with an air rifle through the lungs, and it went less than 100 yards. I mean,
Wow.
Dang.
it took off a dead run, tipped right over. So yeah, so we've been going out and shooting squirrels with them too.
Yet another example. Before you got on the podcast, we were talking about how we had a complete failure of coyote hunting this last weekend. I went up north, and we shared a story of someone who was successful, and now another one. So you didn't even know it, but you're rubbing it in our faces.
Well, here's the deal. Greg's story here is exactly how I shoot all my coyotes when they're near the chicken coop. I have chickens also, or when I see them out mousing in the field. Now, when I actually go coyote hunting, I rarely shoot them, but it's always when I see them in my field or they're by the chicken coop or something.
I would love to ask you a few questions about tracking because I know that you're proficient in that. What are some things that most hunters don't know or don't see now that if they did or understood would be better at tracking after an archery shot on a kill or a shot on a deer?
I think it really starts with, so in New York, we have to be licensed to track with dogs. So I have my license for leash tracking dogs. So I've done that for a couple of years, not like publicly, but from friends and buddies myself. And a good buddy of mine does it for a lot of people, and I got him into it. So even if I'm not on tracks with him, he calls me. We do this all the time. There's a couple tracks a week usually. I'm sort of on the phone with him, going over what the hunter said, what they're seeing on the ground, and then moving from there. The thing we've learned over and over again is that what the hunter is telling us is like 96% of the time is wrong. The hunter's wrong. The hunter,
I'm sure,
the deer was not at the angle the hunter thought. The deer was not standing where the hunter thought. The deer ran off in a different direction than the hunter thought. I mean, it seems like really, but in the heat of the moment, you get so excited that a lot of what you think happened probably didn't happen, or it's slightly different. So I say try to pay as much attention to what you can remember at the shot, but then immediately try to really pay attention to where the deer is going. Stare at that spot when it jumps over that stone wall or runs through that piece of the thicket by that beech tree or that little maple. Pay close attention to how the deer's acting. I guess the sound of the arrow, pay attention to that because that tells you a lot. When the arrow and the impact, once you get a feel for it, you're like, okay, that sounded like a good rib hit, or no, that sounded like a gut shot. But then pay attention to how the deer acts. Does it bolt 20 yards and hunch up and slowly walk off, flicking its tail, like classic gut shot? Is it tripping over stuff as it leaves? When you call your buddies, when you sit down and regain your thoughts, or when you have to call a dog tracker, all that part is going to be really important, trying to figure out what happened immediately after the shot. So if you can sort of calm yourself and try to really recall that and pay attention to it, That makes a huge difference. That's the biggest thing.
Do you have a suggested? I've been having this conversation a little bit too. I mean, obviously it's different when we're fortunate enough to see the animal go down. You know, you don't have to give it as much time, right? You see it, you know it's laying right there. Say the animal bolts out of sight and you don't hear it crash, you don't see it go down. Do you have a recommended, like, this is the minimum amount of time you need to wait before you pursue that animal?
Yeah, I mean, if you're confident it's like a good hit and it runs off, or you're really, pretty confident, everyone says an hour. That's safe. I don't probably always do that, but give it an hour. Wait 40 minutes in your tree stand and slowly pack up your stuff. I'm sure you'll be texting your buddies and be like, man, I just hit one, do that, relax, slowly climb down, go to the shot site, try to look at the arrow, look at the ground. Is there hair on the ground? What color is the hair? Does it look like it's, if you get big clumps of hair on the ground, that's usually not a great thing. The arrow's there covered in fat. You're like, I think it was, brisket hit or whatever. I mean, you'll learn that as you go. And the best thing I can tell is, so your question, I say wait an hour. If it's not really hot, if it's not pouring rain, if it's not, give it an hour. If it's dead now, it's going to be dead in an hour. If you're unsure of the hit, like the more time, the better. And then around here, we have a really bad problem with coyotes, actually, that, man, if we leave it for more than 3 or 4 hours, coyotes are going to be on it. So
Wow.
even a gut shot, it's that real balancing act of like, man, I'd love to let it lay 12 hours, but can I give it 3 or 4 and then slowly go in, see, and if we jump it, we back out again. There's a dance you're always going to have to do in that ideal situation. If you think it's a gut shot, it's cool, leave it overnight.
Yeah.
Just give it as much time as possible. But the other thing is get on as many tracks as you can. Anytime your buddy's like, it's Sunday at 9:00, you're just sitting down with your family after dinner and whatever else, and your buddy calls you like, I hit one, a couple hours ago, I'm not sure. Go. I'm an hour away. Go on every track you can get on. All your buddies, like, just be the guy that they call that you're going to show up either way, and then you can learn so much. Because, if you're really successful, what are you going to go on 2, 3, 4 of your own tracks this season? But if you have a group of 4 or 5 buddies and everyone's shooting 2, 3 deer, you can go on easy dozen tracks a season, and you can learn a lot from those, even the good hits. And certainly from the less than ideal ones, you can learn a lot.
Totally. That's
I think,
great.
following up is like one of those things, it's sort of gut feeling the more you do it. But if you're like, oh, I got great blood, and you track that thing a couple 100 yards and, you haven't found the deer, I'm going to back out for another hour. Like, I'm assuming that it shouldn't have gone 300 yards with a long hit. I mean, they can. I've seen it happen, but I'm going to back out and give it a little more time. If I'm walking down a trail and I'm finding beds, like a bloody bed, I'm backing out immediately because it means I probably bumped it. A lot of times you get that back of the lung liver hit where you're like, I got a little lung blood, I got some bubbles, I got a little bit of foam, but I got liver blood. I've seen livers kill deer in 30 seconds, and I had a buddy that had to finish one off while tracking 21 hours later.
Dang.
And no rhyme or reason. It wasn't like, oh, we barely hit the liver. He sent me pictures of the liver, and the broadhead went straight through the middle of it. And it was 21 hours later, he had to shoot it again. So,
In your experience in talking with some trackers, I used a dog tracker on one of mine 2 years ago and couldn't find it during that time. But I remember talking with trackers that they had this term like zombie bucks during the rut. Is that something that you see as well? Like longer tracks for bucks in the rut because they have kind of the adrenaline pumping? Or is that kind of a mythical phrase?
I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of that. I mean, maybe in a real marginal hit, like a leg hit, maybe like a way back intestine hit or something, you might get a buck that would normally bed down that maybe wants to go a little further, a little harder. But generally, I mean, if you hit a deer, like, if you hit a liver hit, you rupture that diaphragm. Generally, if nothing pushes them, they're going to go down pretty quick. They're going to bed down at least. I mean, they might bed multiple times, but they're going to go, a few 100 yards maybe and bed up. So we don't see a lot of that. I've seen more issues with does actually that have been like gut shot during the rut, and then bucks just relentlessly pushing them, like a doe and estrus, and like the bucks will just push them and push them and push them. We've seen that before for sure. Like we're like tracking, like, oh, there's the doe, like really not okay. And the buck is like, come on, So,
Jeez.
yeah.
Man. Yeah. One more question popped into my mind too. This might be a really short answer, but with trad bow, would you advise people aim in any different place than they're used to? Like, there's been a lot of discussion that I've seen about like compound users in particular aiming at the heart instead of where some of them would traditionally aim a little bit back and go for the double lung. Would you recommend the same thing because there's less margin of error in the like vital V? I've heard that phrase before. Do you train people to kind of go more center mass than like lower third right above the heart, or are you just like it's the same?
I think really trying to slide it up like forward in that vital V, you're just out of a tree stand, you're asking for hitting bowing. Especially out of a tree stand. Those scapula, everyone says, oh, the scapula isn't blocking anything. Well, that's not true at all. If you're shooting a vital V type shot out of a stand at close range, that scapula comes into play. I mean, usually the back flat part of it, and that should slow an arrow down too much, even with the trad bow. I always, for years and years and years, even with the trad bow, shot for the heart. And over the past couple of years, I've been sort of holding just a little bit back. I was always shooting right in the crease, and now I kind of aim that, a couple inches behind the crease. Just shooting big 3-blade broadheads, and you drive one in the shoulder, you're not going to. Chances are you're not going to recover. You hit that big knuckle, you hit something way up front. If you hit back a little bit and catch the liver with a big broadhead, chances are you'll get that deer. You'll have to give it a few hours, but you'll get that deer. So, one thing is they are slower. So I always say aim, depends on your area. I know guys will aim below the deer, expecting the deer to drop. But I always say aim as low as you possibly can, where if it didn't drop, you'd still kill it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? So like out of a tree stand, I'm aiming sort of for like that top of the heart, back top of the heart, lower lungs, where I'll still kill it if it doesn't move. But if it drops, it'll still give me the biggest margin for error, or I'll have, 6, 8, 10 inches of drop and still be able to get lungs.
Totally.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Greg, is there anything that you were thinking about as we were talking that you didn't get time to share, or something that we didn't ask about that popped into your mind that you wanted to share about this?
I don't know. I just, I feel like shoot like you're having fun with, right? Like shoot a compound, pick up a stick bow, shoot a stick bow a little bit too, play around.
Yeah.
I went years and years where I shot both. So shoot both, right? If you got a spot where you're like, man, I got a ground blind on this pinch point, and there's always a ton of does coming to that clover plot, like take a stick bow out and go shoot a doe at 10 yards on the ground, right? And then like, obviously be proficient and confident. I'm not saying go out there and just wing it, but like do that, and then like, go hunt your rut spots with your compound and have fun. Like, if you want to hunt out of a saddle, but don't be tied to it. Have hang-ons, have climbers, have ground blinds. Don't be afraid to sit in like a natural brush blind on the ground. Melody was talking about she hunts on the ground a lot, just sort of moving through the woods. She gets shots that way. Like, just have at it. Make it fun, right? Like we're doing this because we enjoy it. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be such a chore. It shouldn't be so work. It's hard, but all of it, just have fun with it, right? How many times,
That's great.
The end of you get through day 5 of your rutcation, you've been grinding, you're like, why am I even doing this, right? That sucks, right?
Yeah.
We all have those days, but just have a positive outlook with all of it. Like the guy who comes ready every day, having fun and just like ready to grind it out and do it, they're the ones that are going to succeed, right? We've all been in a hunting camp where someone's just like a Debbie Downer and like, it sucks. So if you want to shoot a stick bow, shoot a stick bow. You want to shoot your compound, shoot your compound. You're just a gun hunter, have fun with the rifle. But there's no reason you can't do all of it.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. Greg, this has been super fun. Thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me
I feel like
on.
we could talk for a lot more time. You got wealth of knowledge and experience. So where can people who are not following what you're putting out now find your stuff and learn from you more? How can they connect with you?
Mostly I'm on Wild Traditions Outdoors on Instagram. It's pretty much where I'm at. Most of my videos, I film a lot of my hunts. Most of my videos go through the Push Archery. They'll be on their YouTube channel. So a lot of my stuff goes up on there, and I share all that stuff on my thing.
It'll be down below in the link or in the description. We'll make sure it's there. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it, man. Well, that was fun, man.
That was cool.
Did you learn something new or
I mean,
cue in on something?
There was a couple things I thought were really interesting. I like so my shot process with my compound bow, right? Like when I target shoot, it's almost different. I shouldn't say it's different, it's the same. But I mean, like, you know how I'm totally calm target shooting. Repeat, repeat, repeat. There has been times, especially when I was younger, like where you rush a shot because you forget that because your adrenaline is going. My thing now that
100%.
that I make sure that I do every single time, I have a bubble level on my sight. And that is the thing that, like, that's my last thing. I'm like, is the bubble in the center of the level? It is. Okay, now I can shoot. Like, I can squeeze it off now. And I was just really intrigued by, like, what would it be if I was shooting a trad ball? You know, like for Melody, it's when the feathers hit her nose. For him, it's when he hears the click noise. And for me right now with my compound, it's always like, that's the last thing I do before I squeeze is I'm like, is the bubble in the middle? Okay, squeeze. But that kind of calms me down actually watching that bubble.
Yes. It takes your mind off of the massive buck that you're looking at.
Yeah. I mean,
I get what you mean.
Yeah. And actually the 8-pointer I shot last year, that's a pretty nice buck, like a 3.5-year-old buck, nice buck. And I wasn't really nervous on that one at all. And I wasn't nervous on that 9-pointer really, but I don't get too worked up because I've done it a lot and I stay pretty calm. But the thing that made me a little bit nervous about the 9-pointer was just the fact that I was like, I know this is on film. I know it's on film.
People are gonna watch this.
Yeah, I better shoot this thing. But his tracking insights were really cool. And as he was saying those things, I'm like, man, I walked through all of that this year. I went on tons of tracks. And I learned so much from tracking that 9-pointer this year. And it reiterated things that I knew already, but also learned some new stuff. It was just really cool.
I have recently opened both my eyes, even when I'm shooting my compound. And I like it. It's cool. I mean, I find the pin with one eye and then I'll open the other one.
Okay.
And the cool thing about it is I feel like with one eye, you can't actually see the arrow flight as well. But with two eyes, you can see that thing fly and hit the target better. And it's just cooler. Go try it if you're an archery person that shoots with one eye. Try shooting with two eyes open. And you can see the arrow flight. And then, I don't know, it's rad.
That's interesting.
That was a fun one, man. Next time, we have Greg Godfrey on from Tethered. We're pumped for that one. We're excited to have him on. Hear the story of Tethered. We got a couple great guests coming up. We got Garrett Prowley, DIY sportsman. We got a THP intern. We're going to start talking about turkey hunting, dude.
It's going to be here soon, really soon.
It'll be here real soon. Appreciate you all watching. Thanks for staying tuned. Like, subscribe, do the things. We appreciate you. Thanks. All right, my man. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too, dude.
We'll see ya.
All right, later.
Danny Gun Show.
Daddy Gun Time.
Hey there, thanks for watching this video. I'm JD, founder and crew member of the Huntxp team. We're so grateful that you took time to watch this video, and hopefully it's helping you level up your hunting game. That's what we and our community is all about, and we want to invite you into this growing community of hunters that's all about leveling up each other's hunting game. So the first thing you can do is like and subscribe, but even more than that, we got some fun things going on over at our website, huntxp.com. We'd love for you to join our community there and stay connected with what we're doing, what we're working on, and we'd love to hear about what you're after. So thank you for watching this video. We'll see you next time.
Behind the scenes bonus banter.
Pew, pew, pew. Okay.
All right.
What's up? Gunny Dan.
Did you see that I put that? I keep putting it like in the podcast.
Daddy Gun Time.
Hopefully that guy's not he never. Not. I was really hoping that somebody in the shout outs section would like comment on the shout outs video I did.
Yeah.
And then nobody did. I got to do some more shout outs soon. We got tons of followers, tons of subscriptions and whatnot. All right, you ready here? Do you want to talk anymore? Okay.
What's his name again?
I hope that I pronounced it right. I want to say Greg Krause. So Kaurse. That would be Krause, right? What is Ka?
Krause.
I said Krause, didn't I? Yeah, that wouldn't be Krause. It would be
Krause. Yeah, we'll have to ask him.
Krause. All right, well, I'm going to text him. Started building the app.
Did you really?
Yep. It's hard. Yeah. But it's quite the time we live in because I can just literally like screenshot my screen and send it to ChatGPT and be like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, do this. It's pretty crazy, dude. Stuff's moving real fast. So
yeah,
that's why I just kind of feel motivated to get, even if it is like 80% what I imagine, just out there and people using it because I don't know. He said okay, so I think he'll jump on soon. I don't know. Kars. Sounds German. Kraus? No, that's putting the R too far forward.
It seems like the R should be there though, but it's not. Yeah.
Kind of want to just do turkey stuff.
Yeah, that's coming pretty quick here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to crank out a bunch of turkey content for our site and stuff. And then I've already started to cut up my old turkey hunting videos into shorts and kind of archiving them for, I have like a redhead vest that's like a triple XL that I bought kind of spontaneously when I didn't have a turkey vest like a day before season. But I still use it. It's massive though.
I use no turkey vest currently, and I just shove stuff in my pockets, and it's inconvenient.
I sometimes use a turkey vest whitetail hunting if I'm planning to be on the ground.
Yeah.
I actually shot the crazy looking one with my turkey vest on from the ground. Because I was bow hunting from the ground.
I didn't know you shot that from the ground.
Yeah, the location, it's different now because I wouldn't hunt it the same way because I got permission with the landowner above or north of where I was at.
Yeah.
But I used to just have permission, and it was basically all big meadow field that went up to woods, and I had permission in the meadow, and there wasn't, and it was before I had a blind, but I didn't have it with me. And I just sat right up in the bushes and looked over a scrape. And I shot it right from the. Well, I had my turkey vest on, and I just shot it,
dude.
But it was I had my winter. I have like white scentlock camo or like snow colored camo.
Yeah.
It was perfect because it had just snowed. It was 2 years ago when Halloween was just nasty, or like the day before Halloween was absolutely nasty, and it was still snowing, and it's perfect.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and then it was quite the drama.
But now he's on your wall.
He's there. It's just hard to describe when you look up and you're like...
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you just great. How about on our end?
Absolutely.
Well, dude, this is great. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, no problem.
Really
Thanks
appreciate it. Mel was like,
great.
you got to have Greg. You got to have Greg on. So here
awesome.
You are.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
I guess a question I had before we get back into it is like, because Mel recommended you, would love to talk about traditional bow hunting, but is there any other areas that we would be idiots if we didn't ask you about?
No, I mean, traditional bow hunting is where I'm at now, but I was a compound hunter for a long time leading up to that. So like she did the crossbow and then went straight to trad bow. She didn't have like that whole experience. A lot of people sort of pick one or the other. I sort of did the thing where a lot of people are starting to do now, where they move in from like, shooting a compound, they start dabbling in traditional, and eventually they, dive full on in. So
Well, we're excited to get to know you more, man. But can you help us with your last name? Because I think I may have
Krause.
butchered.
Krause.
We had it.
Hey,
We had
we
it.
nailed
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
I was like, I looked at it. I was like, oh shoot, I don't know if I said that right.
Now you got it.
Got it. Krause.
Cool.
That's very good, man. Well, really appreciative of your time. Excited to learn from you. So I'll just awkwardly back up and say,
Absolutely.
hey, Greg, welcome in. You know, I should do just a quick on it. So Jonny is based in northern Wisconsin. We're high school buddies, longtime friends. I'm based in Minneapolis. I was childhood friends with Mel growing up. Our moms are like besties, and my sister is good friends with her. So those are all the connections.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. How did you meet Mel? Just curious.
Just through Instagram.
Instagram.
We've never met in person. We just she'll have like a tracking. No. She'll have like a tracking question, and she'll like, shoot me a text or a message. She'll be like, hey, I think, so we go back and forth with that. It started with like, sharing bread recipes or some nonsense. And then
wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, just diving in. Like, I'll send her some arrows occasionally or something for, she does a lot of like intro, getting kids into shooting stick bows. So yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome. The internet's amazing, man.
It really is.
Now we're connected. Look at that.
I met some amazing people through the internet.
There we go. Love it. All right. I'll do that thing.